After finishing their meal, Xing and Han Ting go for a walk. Xing mentions how Han Ting seems to switch between being distant and friendly. Han Ting asks her what she thinks of him. Xing is momentarily speechless, and they continue walking in silence, with Xing's heart racing. Once Han Ting sees Xing to her room, he heads back to his own. Just then, someone knocks on his door. Han Ting opens it to find Zheng Di standing there. Zheng Di, who is visiting friends in Germany, says she thought she'd drop by. Han Ting, knowing her real intentions, talks to her briefly, and then mentions it's late and he needs to get some rest. The next morning is supposed to be Xing's departure day. At breakfast, Zheng Di is already there and invites Han Ting to sit with her. When Xing arrives, she sees Han Ting sitting with Zheng Di, who is even eating from his plate. Feeling upset, Xing sits at another table and quickly orders her own food. Li invites Xing and Xiaomeng out for a meal and also calls Yishao. Yishao is hesitant at first about meeting her friends. That evening, Yishao shows up at the gathering. Xing greets him right away. Li is curious and learns from Xing that Yishao is the boss of Xingyue. Li hadn't known this before, but it makes sense why Yishao often gives her investment advice. After dinner, Xing and Xiaomeng leave early to give Li and Yishao some time alone. However, Yishao gets a call and has to leave, which makes Li feel a bit down. At the hospital, Xing meets a patient desperately trying to get into a new product trial at her company. The reception desk refuses her, but when the patient recognizes Xing and pleads with her directly, Xing is moved by her poor condition. She takes the patient's examination report to Yichun, and after confirming the patient meets the criteria, Xing agrees to include her in the trial. Qiuzi, who is now with Yichun, sees Xing in the hospital. Qiuzi asks Yichun if he has told Xing about their relationship. Yichun says he hasn't found the right moment. Later, the company calls to confirm the patient's case, noting her poor background and need for long-term care, which they cannot guarantee. Despite this, Xing decides to include the patient, believing that people who need help should not be excluded just because they aren't wealthy. Lin Jia's mother finds out that his bar has been open for a few days and decides to visit, where Lin Jia almost doesn't recognize her due to her large sunglasses and hairstyle. However, his mother is very happy. She even sings a song. Her cheerful and lively nature makes Lin Jia laugh. Grandfather Han calls Han Ting to talk about his future and suggests that Zheng Di would be a good wife for him. Han Ting honestly admits he has never thought of Zheng Di in that way. Xing decides the company should focus on human skeletal implants, given their capabilities and technical features. This technology has a big international market and fits well with Xingchen's research. Han Ting eagerly waits for Xing's birthday, staying up until midnight to send her a birthday message. His legs go numb from waiting, but he sends the message right on time. Xing is surprised to see Han Ting's message as the first one she receives in the morning. Xiaomeng has booked and decorated a place for the birthday celebration, but they unexpectedly see Qiuzi with Yichun. Li and Xiaomeng are shocked. Xiaomeng and Li angrily confront Qiuzi, asking what she is doing. Qiuzi says there is nothing wrong with pursuing someone she likes. Yichun admits they have just started dating and that he pursued Qiuzi. Li reminds Qiuzi not to upset Xing on her birthday. Xiaomeng and Li worry about Xing, but Xing has already seen everything from the window. She feels a storm of emotions inside. Xing pretends not to know anything and forces a smile at the party. When Xing blows out the candles, her eyes are red. She smiles and wishes Qiuzi well, explaining that she and Yichun have not been in contact for a long time. After saying this, she leaves the party early. Li chases after her, but Xing says she wants to walk alone. Li feels helpless. She texts Yishao, mentioning that something has happened at Xing's birthday party. Yishao then informs Han Ting, who immediately calls Xing and drives to pick her up. Han Ting spends Xing's birthday with her, and they end up spending the night together. The next morning, Xing wakes up, feeling a bit embarrassed about the night before. Luckily, Han Ting isn't beside her. She tries to sneak out while Han Ting is on the phone in the living room. Just as Xing opens the door to leave, she bumps into Tang Thong, who has come to report for work. Xing returns to Xingchen. Feeling increasingly embarrassed, she decides to take a few days off. Han Ting goes to Xingchen to find her. When he hears she has taken leave and gone back to her hometown, he becomes even more puzzled. Han Ting meets with Yishao to ask about Xing. Yishao, understanding the situation, advises Han Ting not to rush. He explains that for someone like Xing, discovering their relationship has moved forward requires time to adjust. Meanwhile, Lin Jia's mother invites Xiaomeng to be her vocal teacher. Initially, there were some misunderstandings, but as they get to know each other, Lin Jia finds he doesn't dislike her. Han Ting hasn't seen Xing for several days. Even the usual work reports are being handled by Su Zhizhou. When he learns that Xing will attend an entrepreneur exchange forum, he asks Tang Thong to ensure he can attend too. At the forum, Xing thinks her meeting with Han Ting is coincidental. Han Ting reviews her speech draft. He advises her to ground her feelings to make them more relatable. With Han Ting's guidance, Xing quickly grasps the key points of her speech. After the entrepreneur exchange forum, Han Ting and Xing go to dinner together. During dinner, Chang He insists Xing drink, targeting Han Ting. Han Ting takes the drink himself, then quickly leaves with Xing. In the car, Han Ting asks Tang Thong for medication, as he is allergic to alcohol. Xing notices his flushed face and rapid breathing, and asks if he needs to go to the hospital. Just then, they get a call from the hospital about a volunteer having complications after surgery. Han Ting suggests reviewing all the patient's medical records before making any decisions. Li Li and Xing visit the patient, who seems apologetic but unwilling to talk. Xing feels something is wrong. Han Ting drives Xing home and at the entrance, looks into her eyes and asks why she has been avoiding him. Xing looks troubled. Han Ting guesses her uncertainty and asks if she is unsure about their relationship. Xing remains silent. Just then, Xiaomeng opens the door and sees Han Ting at the door. Chang He visits Zheng Di and mentions Han Ting's alcohol allergy and how he took Xing's drink for her. Zheng Di says nothing, but her dislike for Xing deepens. Patient Fengmei's issues are not due to Xing's products. That night, her husband receives an anonymous call. The caller, aiming to bring down Xingchen, has bribed Fengmei's husband to frame Xingchen's products. Early the next morning, Fengmei's husband wheels her to Xingchen's office, loudly claiming there is a problem with Xingchen's products and adding exaggerated lies. People around start filming with their phones. Xing refuses to meet Fengmei's husband's compensation demands, stating they will only compensate if an investigation proves Xingchen's fault. Fengmei's husband persists, and in the pushing and shoving, Xing falls to the ground. A pair of strong hands helps her up, and Xing looks up to see that it is Han Ting. Tang Thong pulls Fengmei's husband aside, suggesting that agreeing to the compensation demands could resolve everything smoothly. Han Ting takes Xing back, and she disagrees with Han Ting's approach of using money to settle the issue. Han Ting explains that for such unreasonable people, ordinary means won't work, and letting them spread lies would have a terrible impact on Xingchen.